magical beings. Welcome to this episode of Everyday Enchantment. I cannot wait to introduce the guest today because she is an incredible human being. Her name is Karen Anderson. She's a master certified life coach and an author of all the books you want to read about mother-daughter relationships because she works with women who want to take care of themselves in the relationships they have with their mothers, particularly I think when you have a difficult relationship, not always, but that's her specialty. And I just have learned so much about my own self and my own relationship in listening to Karen's wisdom over the years that I've known her. So I cannot wait to bring her in. Today, we are going to talk about how you can have an enchanted life with or without your mother ever having to change or the relationship having to change. And I cannot wait to give some practical advice that I'm sure I will take and that will be helpful for you as well. So join us on this episode. Greetings. Welcome. I'm so excited. Could you tell how I'm always so excited to have these incredible guests? And you are absolutely somebody who I've been so inspired by because I do have I should say, because my mom has passed away, but I had a very difficult relationship. And for the longest time, I definitely believed that my life couldn't be any better because of what was going on between her and me or she and me or whatever as a former English teacher, whatever the right pronouns are for that particular sentence. I don't even care anymore. But welcome and thank you for being here, Karen. I would love to hear a little bit of again, anything else I missed in your background or bio that you want to share.
Yeah. So it's funny. Again, people always ask well, how did you get started in this? And I'm like, well, I have a mother. and it's been a fascinating journey. I mean, will be 60 in November and my mom will be 82 in August. And we have had a particularly difficult time, especially I would say over the past 15-ish, 20 years. Mm-hmm. And she had a very difficult relationship with her mother. Mm. And it was at the end of 2010 when we had sort of a big falling out. And I decided that I didn't want to see or speak to her again. I thought that was my final decision and that was going to be it. And since then, it's, as you know, right? Life sends us experiences and opportunities and signs and symbols and all the things.
Wait a second. You're not finished. Here we go. I got something new for you.
And what's interesting is that right around the same time, actually just to be honest, a couple of days after I told my mom I never wanted to see or speak to her again, my father died unexpectedly. Now, my parents were divorced when I was 2. So, I mean, it wasn't like the two of them were together. And that's a whole other story about his death and what happened and how that impacted me. But I remember at the time thinking that the wrong parent had died. Mm. But then I was like, oh, okay, Dad and I are complete. Mom and I are not. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I've sort of I sort of scrambled my way right through the next few years, discovered coaching, have always been a writer, had been blogging for years at that point. And it was in coaching and it was in getting coach training that my mother's stuff really sort of came to the surface. Mm. And I wasn't expecting to have this become something that I do, but it was so powerful that I was like, I can't not.
Yeah.
Right. Because up until that point, I'd had all kinds of therapy, and not to say that therapy is bad. It's not. Mm-hmm. But I guess maybe I was just at a certain point in my life, and it was sort of serendipity that I learned some tools at the time that really made a difference for me
Yeah.
and how I think about myself, which then helped me learn how to think about the relationship differently. And so my
Mm,
mom and I do speak now. We don't have what I think some people would say we don't have a look from the outside looking in, some people might say we don't have a good relationship,
mhm.
but I am very much of the belief that like we get to decide
Yeah.
whether it's healthy or not and whether it's good or not.
Yeah.
And anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I love like just the power of decision, right? To be able to say, I get to decide, nobody else, the world doesn't get to decide. If I'm talking to her today, I'm not talking to her tomorrow. And I think that that's part of what takes people away from feeling enchanted when they're this worry, right? And this back and forth, and just being in a truth in this moment. Today, this is what feels best for me. This what is what feels good, or what, however, I mean, those are loaded words. For each of us. And I think that I don't know. Personally, I didn't have a great relationship with my mother. She was very abusive
Hmm.
to me, particularly, and mental illness, and there was addiction. I mean, there's so much that just surrounded her, was part of her, and then even her death, which was by suicide. I mean, it just, everything about our relationship was messy. And it's interesting too, because when I found coaching like you, all of a sudden, you're right, I've been in therapy, but all of a sudden there's these tools and there's a new way forward almost for me. Some of what I found just from my own experience in therapy was like, okay, going back and witnessing these things, but then what do you do moving, like how do you go forward? And that's what coaching did for me. It was a bridge to be like, here's how you live your life today and be able to feel good and be, grounded and centered with or without her having to do something different. My ex-husband was also part, like there were several people that were part of that. Like nobody else has to change
Yeah.
for you to be able to really shine in your own life. And that was a shift for me.
And you touch on something, in describing, some of the challenges that your mom had that I didn't know at the time. I mean, I knew I wasn't the only person in the world who had a difficult relationship because, as I said, I know, her mom, my mom and her mom did as well. Um, but it did, I felt kind of like, like there's not very many of us probably, but
Mhm.
what I have discovered and, read about and researched and really become fascinated with is the idea that these difficult relationships don't happen in a vacuum. They happen in the context of misogyny, patriarchy, white supremacy, et
Mhm.
cetera, et cetera. And that women, especially of certain generations who were being raised in, say, the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s,
Mhm.
maybe even, right? There are structures and pressures and systems operating there.
Yes,
And
very much
so,
so.
right, and women not being valued equally, um,
Mhm.
and the mental, emotional toll that takes on a
Yeah.
woman. And then, you know, add in addiction, add in, or maybe it's a result of those addictions,
Absolutely,
right?
right? Yep.
Not knowing how to handle that, not knowing how to be in the world, not knowing, all those things. And
Yeah.
so having that context made such a huge difference as
Mhm.
well.
I totally agree, because when you take the zoom or the lens out further, I see, my personal opinion or belief about my mom is she had so much unresolved trauma. She
Yeah.
did not know what to do with it. She didn't really want children, but like she wanted to escape the childhood trauma of her own life. And so she got herself into this, into this other unit, marriage unit, right? Because that was the choice. If you wanted to escape your family, you hop from
Exactly.
one thing to the next. And so all of that trauma, to your point, to me felt like, because it was never and I don't mean healed in like, oh, I'm healed, I'm done, but there was no healing process or journey.
Or even
And
acknowledgement.
absolutely. And then to your point, you mix in my father, who has his own a very interesting structure there that did not encourage this
Right.
to work itself out. You do. I like it's weird to me, and this is kind of funny, and I'm curious what you think. When my mom first died, she came through to me. So I'm also a medium, which I don't usually. I mean, not I'm not hiding it, but I don't generally. I'm not out there doing mediumship work. But she came through to me, and I said to her, "Look, I can't talk to you yet. I'm still upset."
Yeah.
And what ended up happening, I don't know. I probably didn't tell you the story yet, but what ended up happening was two acquaintances and friends of mine, like they didn't even know each other. In a matter of a couple months, we're taking mediumship classes and we're practicing, like you're practicing your craft. And my mom came through to both of them at different times to give me a message. And that kind of started the conversation, which is, to me, it's interesting, right? Because I think sometimes that we think, oh, we have to confront the actual human in person. I have to say
Mm.
this. And what my work is always about is you might be in a difficult relationship with somebody, but you don't always have to confront it face to face as the solution. I
Yeah,
don't
I mean,
know.
that like in one of my books, or I don't know if it's in the book or if it's in the description of the book or whatever, but it says um, that she doesn't have to be involved. In fact, it's probably
Right.
better that she's not involved. So, like, if she's still alive or if she's not alive, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, she can't be involved that physically, but
Right.
right, it's all like I also love to describe it because I think sometimes people think of it as like, oh, I have to make this big, massive change. I have to
Yeah.
change myself. It's going to be hard, right?
Yes.
And I see it more like it's subtle tweaks in your energy, which our thoughts and our feelings are energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And um and then also another thing that's really fascinating, you brought up trauma, right? And I don't think people understood what trauma was or is back then, and also wanted to avoid it at all costs, like because I think people thought if somebody thinks there's something wrong with me, then
Yeah.
that's like one more reason to be like kicked out of the tribe and you're gonna die, right?
Absolutely.
um but so when we just do subtle work
Mm-hmm.
on our own energy and in our own nervous systems, which again, that sounds like, well, how do you do that? But
Yeah. Well, that's my question for you. Is it like, yeah, how do we do that?
it's simple. And my point though is like, and I love this analogy, is that it's like an ocean liner coming across the ocean from, say, from
Mm.
like England to New York City.
Okay.
And it's this big, massive
Mm-hmm.
ship, right? All the captain has to do is shift 1 degree and you end
Mm.
up in a completely different place,
It's true. It's
right?
so
It's not like
true.
you have to shift 360 or 180, right?
Yeah.
It's like just a little bit can make a big
Mhm.
difference. And so one of the things, and I am not a like certified somatic experiencing person. I'm not a trauma specialist. I don't, play one on TV even or on the internet. But what I love and what I have learned in taking some classes is that a lot of the practices that help us be more in our bodies, more
Mhm.
regulated, are
Mhm.
things that we do anyway, or that maybe we don't do but are easy to do. And I have a cat that's going to
Oh,
meow.
I love it. Like, the cat has an opinion. Absolutely. He or she is seconding this work. Yes.
And so, but like things like chanting,
Mm.
dancing,
Mhm.
patting, like shaking,
Yeah.
humming, right?
Yeah.
Like these are all very, very simple ways. Now, if
Mhm.
you've got like, I also have a dog who never seems to want to be involved in anything I'm doing in here. Um,
All the animals want
this
to
is
hear all the good, juicy details of this
which
conversation
is very
today.
interesting.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah. So if some people have more trauma,
Yes.
right? And you maybe need more support.
Mm-hmm.
But I find that for those of us who maybe just have a little bit of like dysregulation going on, and we
Yeah.
all from time to time become dysregulated, but
Right.
just understanding that and that it's like normal, and like how
Mhm.
can we bring ourselves back? And there's just really quick ways,
Yeah.
right? Just
No, I
like,
agree
here
with
I
you.
am. My name's Karen. I'm talking to
Mhm.
Stacey. Boom.
Mhm.
Here I am in the present.
Yeah. And that goes right to this idea that nobody else has to change. I
Yeah.
can I can learn or incorporate, integrate different things for my own self that can help me be in a moment with almost like to me with whatever comes at us, right? I mean, it's could be a difficult parent relationship, could be a difficult relationship with a child or a partner, a spouse. I mean, there's so many things that to me, and especially I just feel like the way the world is because there's so much. I just think just the pandemic itself has created all this kind of unprocessed trauma or
Yeah. Unregulated
what
energy. Yeah.
unregulated energy that it's like I was just talking to a woman that I don't know very well down on the trail this morning, and we were talking about how people are just snapping about like what side of the street you're walking on the trail. It's like, and
Yeah.
I said to her, my take is there's a lot of this, again, this unregulated, dysregulated energy that people, they don't know what to do with. They're holding in their bodies. And you're right. It doesn't have to be huge gestures, which I think I believed years ago that there
Yeah.
needed to be some big gesture. There needed to be some big gesture with my family. There needed to be some big gesture. And I just realized that, to your point, you're right. Every little daily intention, which to me is at the heart of my enchantment practice. It's not about pretending, hey, everything is a rainbow, but it's being with myself and attending to whatever that is that I most need in a moment. And it's funny to me because when I did some somatic work with a coach a couple of years ago around some of my trauma, one of the things she's like, if you put both your hands on your heart, it's like it's a calming
Mhm.
mechanism. I said, I do that all the time. Like it's probably like my thing. If people said, "Oh, what does Stacey do with their hands?" Oh, she puts them on her heart. It's interesting how we already have a natural inclination to help us come back into that regulated space.
Yeah. And sometimes the things that our bodies want to do to protect us are
Mhm.
seen as weird
Mm.
or strange or weak, right? Like
Yeah.
what something I heard about, I don't know, the past couple of years that I really love is that in emergency rooms now, if someone's been in a car accident and we're wearing our seatbelt, which saves our lives, but the
Mhm.
seatbelt prevents our bodies from doing something that it naturally wants to do in order to protect, which is to curl up and
Yeah.
protect the vital
Yeah.
organs, right?
Mhm.
So if somebody comes into the ER after a car wreck and they're not, they don't have to have surgery or something, right?
Sure, sure, they're not being whisked away
Yeah.
to something, yes.
It's like they're encouraged to curl up as a way
Ah.
to sort of complete the pattern that the
Mm.
body wants to do. And so often we stop ourselves from
Yeah.
those. One of my favorite questions though, and again, I started to recognize that like, oh, I have a tendency in my mom's
Mm.
presence to freeze, right? To
Mm.
sort of dissociate a little
Mhm.
bit, to like, that was like
Mhm.
the way I protected myself. I started to realize like, oh, hers is to fight.
Mm.
So it's not like, oh, she's just this mean person who likes to pick
Yeah.
fights. This is her, she feels a threat.
Yeah.
And so the question is, what is the threat my body is perceiving? And what is
Mm.
the threat your mother's body might be perceiving? Which
Oh, that's such a
so
good
often it doesn't make
question.
sense, right? Like, well, why would my mother be threatened? But like, doesn't make sense in the body. It's not a
Right.
logical
Right. It
thing.
doesn't go through the brain system and say, "Oh, yeah, let's flush this out and make it all make sense." So everybody would be like, "Of course." It's true. And you know what? And just thinking about that it really is when you, to me, because one of my biggest things is always to take a pause. So when you can take a pause and look at, oh, here's how I'm reacting or responding. Here's what, again, my mother, is doing in such a way, because I don't, somewhere along the lines I read, and I don't know who to attribute it to, but every action is an attempt to have a need met. Somebody brilliant said that, right, at some point. And so it's like, if you're getting a different reaction than what you thought you should get, right? Like, oh, why is my mother always arguing with me or saying something or ignoring me or whatever? I mean, my mom would give me the silent treatment and it'd be like, what did I do? I was constantly trying to figure out what I did. She would pull away. And so when you can step out for a second, this is what I hear you saying, like, out of our own perspective, maybe not right while it's happening, but be like, ooh, let me look at myself a little bit and what's going on. Let me look at her a little bit and see what's going on. And I don't, it doesn't mean that it excuses a behavior. It doesn't mean,
No,
oh, hey, we're like, oh, we're just going to allow everything. Because I know that that's your work too. It's not about that. It's
no,
about really good boundaries.
yeah,
However, that context changed everything for me when I started to realize how much my mom was in a situation she did not want to be in, she didn't know how to get out of, and she was like flailing, drowning, right, in all of this.
yeah,
And it just, again, it didn't excuse her, but it absolutely helped me mend a relationship with her. But again, on the other side, in the afterlife, we have come to a really beautiful place with each other, which, if you had asked me, I never would have thought would have ever happened. She died in order for us to like find that place, and not that she had to. I mean, again, I'm sure I could have also found a place, but it was really hard for me because I'm sure with the clients you work with, I can have all these beautiful tools. You put me in with my family and it's like I'm like 5 years old again.
yeah.
It's so interesting, and then I judge myself and I'm really mean because I'm like, I should know better,
Well,
and that is not helpful.
yeah, that's part of the work, right?
Mhm.
Is in being like, of course I'm triggered.
Yeah.
And like something I love to say, because I once had a consult with a woman who was like, okay, what I want is to be 100% completely untriggered in my mom's presence every single time. I'm like, I can't do
Yeah.
that. Like, and I'm like, and so I remember saying something like, there's no um, pinnacle of untriggered perfection,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's like, because we're humans,
Mhm.
right? And sometimes
Mhm.
like that question of like, what is the threat my body is perceiving? What is the threat her body is perceiving? I remember it allowed me to be like, oh, our triggered nervous systems are interacting here,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And
Absolutely.
now, right? And in terms of more of the mindset piece, it's my mom has a tendency to um, sometimes be cruel and mean.
Mhm.
And that is a thought that I choose to think intentionally,
Mm.
because it reminds me, like,
Mm.
no, I'm not here to take care of her or manage her,
Mhm.
but I also don't want to trigger her on purpose. Although I'll
Right.
tell you, there's times, right, where I'm
Sure, sure.
like, oh, let's get.
I've been there.
But it's like then I'm like, okay, here's the choice I have,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And once we know some of our triggers, right? Once we know some of her triggers, then we get to make a choice.
Yeah.
And not so much because we're trying to take care of her, because that is not what I'm saying,
Right.
right? But it's
No,
about
it
taking
feels like
care
it's
of,
taking care of yourself.
yeah.
And
But
that's why
by
she doesn't have to change, because then
right.
you get to do it for you. Yeah.
And by
Yeah.
its very nature, right, when we change just a little bit, right, that little bit of energy change, it changes the dynamic.
Yes.
And
People
sometimes they
say that
don't like
too.
it, or
Yeah.
sometimes they need to get used to it, or maybe they won't, right? But like,
Mhm. I find it in working with clients, not necessarily with a parent, although I did have a client one time who I helped her change her relationship with her mother, and she's been eternally grateful for forever about it. But it's this idea of just being able to be in that awareness and make choices
Right.
that again, it's so empowering to be like, oh, I get to choose here how I want to be, what I want to do. And that gives us so much more freedom rather than feeling like we're trapped in whatever these dynamics are, this circle and what have you. And what I love, what I'm hearing you say today, which I really love, and I want to kind of pull out for anybody listening, is you can do it with just a small, tiny tweak or change in your own self. You don't have to again, go through some huge transformation in order to see it. And what I also love too is what usually happens, not always, but is a lot of times relationships will get better. Not always, but and people go, no, they didn't do anything. I was like, I know, isn't that great that you you got to create that?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the thing, right? Because a lot of times like some coworkers driving somebody crazy or a boss or what have you. And it's like, how am I going to be able to make this relationship better by just doing it with me? They're going to need to, right? Everybody's like, they need to,
Mhm.
they, and there's no power in the they, right? Because you can't control anybody else. So when you start to say, oh, what can I do? How do I take the best care of myself? And then you get to see some of these results. It's like people are like, ah, I love it. And it's like, but wouldn't have believed it. Nobody believes it at the beginning of the work.
Well, and the ego, right? The ego is like, if it like if I'm the one making the change, then maybe it was my fault all along,
I've
right?
never gone there, but yes, that is an yeah, that's an interesting thought that I have never thought.
I know. I once worked with somebody who was like, "Am I going to end up at the end of this thinking like and realizing that it was my fault or my responsibility all along?" I'm like, "No,
Yeah,
no."
yeah,
But like nobody was taught this,
exactly,
right?
exactly.
I mean, it's no, it's
No,
not.
and to your point about that, I also believe, because to your point too about generations of women before, I mean, there's so much so many things, right, that we're suppressing and keeping women out of alignment and integrity. I believe whatever this space is right here on the planet,
Yeah.
we are here to help create that change, to disrupt and say, this no longer is okay. This doesn't work for really anybody. I'm not sure who it is working for. And we're going to, as difficult or as uncomfortable as it might be the step out into the water to be the disruptors or the change
The
agents. It's
leading
like,
edge.
yes, I'm like, I'm in, even though it's uncomfortable. I'm in.
Yeah,
I
and
know
it's
you're
like
in.
yeah, and it's like I remember how scary it was or how confronting it was,
Mhm.
right? And it's funny. I'm in the process of writing something right now about the idea of taking responsibility,
Mm.
right, for our like I'll never forget. I mean, I don't remember who it was, but I remember the emotional impact it had on me when somebody said
Mhm.
like something about taking responsibility for how I feel about the relationship I have with my mother. And I was like, I was furious.
Mm.
Like ego, right? Like
Yeah, absolutely.
and ego's fine. Ego's not a bad thing.
Yep.
Um and nervous system, right? Like I need to protect.
Yeah.
But it's like that word or that phrase, take responsibility, right?
Mhm.
Sort of implies maybe that it was your fault or that you're going
Mm.
to get in trouble or,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah, I can't wait to see how you write all of that out because
but it's, but then it's like once you can sort of get over that like little ego bit, then it's like, oh my God, this is the freest I've ever been.
Exactly. And I think you're so right because to me, truth, I always say, is like the gatekeeper to freedom. And to be in the truth of something, right? If that resonates, to take responsibility without, again, making it mean I did something wrong, then
Right.
you do. It's like, I don't know, almost everybody on the planet, right, wants to be more at peace, wants to feel freer. And you're right. A lot of us have grown up in situations and families where it's felt the exact opposite. So how do we take this stance to say nobody else has to change, or no person has to change, in order for us to take responsibility in a way that's, like, I would say, like, soulful, right? It's clean. It doesn't have all of these other tentacles around, oh, I did it wrong or what have you. You just come into integrity with your own self in a way that's like, oh, I get to be a creator rather than a victim.
Yeah, I get to.
I
I
get to.
Yeah, that was another thing I remember. I probably said it, and I know some of my clients have said it. It's like, why can't she be the adult?
Mm,
And I'm like, what if you get to be the adult? Because
mm,
I didn't have children. I never wanted children. I do have
mhm,
3 stepkids who are all adults, and they have kids of their own now.
mhm,
Um, and I have worked with coaches and healers who could be my kid. They're young enough to be my kid. Um, and I have gotten to this point where I believe that every generation has wisdom that the
mm,
previous generations don't have.
mm,
And so, yes, we definitely wanted our mothers, our parents to be the adults.
mhm,
And when we talk about that, what does it mean? Okay, like pay the bills and feed us and put a roof
mhm,
over our heads, right?
mhm,
But that's action. That's
mm,
adult action, maybe, but
mm.
it's not necessarily emotionally adult.
Yeah, that's a really
And
good point.
so I like to say, you're the one who gets to be the adult here because you have wisdom
Mhm.
that maybe she didn't have
Yeah,
or can't have. And
yeah.
I'm guessing that, right, that the younger generations have wisdom that I don't have.
Totally. I just had a conversation yesterday about that. I was like, I can't wait. I know it's like typical to criticize, every generation criticize. I'm like, bring it on. They're going to share with us and help us change and create something so much better. Like, that's how I'm
These
always like, what do they know? What are they doing? What are they thinking?
Instead of these kids these days, it's these kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I'm totally in. So maybe that's a little bit different than everybody else, but I am welcoming it. And
Yeah.
and the other thing I want to say too, is I think for me, and this is just my own personal experience, one of the things that I realized in terms of like being able to be enchanted without anything having to change is I could still hold the soft spot for wanting it to be different,
Yeah.
right? For wanting, to your point just now about the like, my mother was never an emotional safety guy, you name it. It didn't. I basically raised myself and then raised some siblings along with me to the best of my ability. And so even now, like when I see Mother's Day things, I
Mhm.
really, it's that idea that, well, it can never be different, right? Where there is, I always held out hope somewhere that somehow it was going to change. And I think that that sometimes hurt me in my growth because I was holding out for something outside of me, right? Rather than being like, okay, what am I going to do different? But then I also realized like that tender, like mother wound in me, or whatever you want to call it, it's okay to hold it and love it and nurture it all the rest of my life. And I get to, right? I get to be the adult. And I can also know that that part of me is also something that I hold and carry as well. I that shifted something for me, allowing like both things to be kind of true at the same time, where it wasn't like, okay, I have to like get over that. So many people say get over that,
Yeah.
and it's like, I don't know. For me, that's just my own truth. It's like there isn't getting over that. So that just is going to tap me every once in a while in a very tender way.
100%. And I think those of us in like the self-improvement field, I can see my own evolution around that kind of language.
Mhm.
Um, in regards to like I believe that I have every age I've ever been lives within me,
I
right?
love
And
that.
yeah, and there's wounds and there's wisdom and there's like
Mhm.
all of it is in there. And sometimes I see it as like sort of like changing the relationship I have to it, and it doesn't mean it's gone.
Mhm.
Um, and some days it brings me to my knees.
Yeah.
But it's the to me, the difference is in like, and it's what you just said, right? It's being able to tend to that part.
Yes.
Either myself or ask somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. Reach out. Don't have to do it all. We don't have to do it all ourselves.
I
I always say that even though I'm a coach, I'm like, I always want support. Like, what's my dream team that can really help me navigate through something?
yeah.
Because why not? Why not? That's why, again, getting wisdom from you, getting wisdom from so many people that are out here talking about things like this that, again, generations before us didn't talk about. It just feels like, oh, I probably have a new version of me like every day or every couple of days. It's like, oh, I see that a little differently. And I want to just before we kind of close, like pull out this thread of how we're in relationship with things, because I think you're 100,000,000% correct. Is I can have that tender part of me. How am I in relationship with it, with myself, has made all the difference. That has helped me create change for myself, even if everything around my family of origin is a hot mess. I can still really feel amazing and good and all of that without anything, again, having to be different in order for me to feel a certain way. And that is, again, like that's at the heart. I mean, it's the heart of, like, again, this whole movement of awareness and consciousness, I think. But mothers are a messy endeavor for
And they're
sure.
humans. Yeah,
And
they're humans.
of
Yeah.
course. And some of it I also think, just from my spiritual perspective, like I have this vision that my mom and I were like at the spiritual soul bus stop before we kind of came on together. And she was like, "So, what do you want to work on?" And I'm like, and I say whatever it is, and she goes, "Okay, got it." Like, we don't even know who's going to take what role, but we're just like sharing. And
That's
then
so
we show up.
cool.
Yeah, we show up on the planet, and we're like, "Oh, okay. Well, I wouldn't have agreed to that had I know exactly how that was going to play out." But you know what? It's all good. And my own just kind of spiritual understanding, at least today, is that we do kind of travel and support each other and play around with these themes. And so if I really go out that way, then that even gives me more peace, because I go, ooh, if I get to play and experiment and learn and grow and gain more awareness and help everything evolve here, then everything just gets to be information for me. Again, I don't always like in the moment, I'm not always like, oh yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
And I can go back out into that view, and that can give me comfort as well too. So
And what you just said is at the heart, I think of it for me, and the work that I do is in what is it that you believe, whether it's true or not, whether you can prove it or not, but you know it makes you feel good. And when you feel that way, good, whatever,
yeah.
and when you feel that way, you show up the way you want to, right? Who cares if it's a fantastical story that could never make sense, right? It doesn't, and it's finding those pieces.
Yeah.
And then,
That's the enchantment. That's the enchantment part to me,
yeah,
right? Finding the pieces that resonate, that are your truth. That, like, again, if you said, Stace, I don't know about your soul bus stop thing, but that's okay. It really works for me. And I don't, right? Like, I don't need you to have to believe me in order for it to be something that really is strong, and vice versa. If there was something
yeah.
that you had. And I love that. And Karen, your work in the world is so impactful. I just know from just my own self being in your presence how much I've even doing a lot of practicing, I've gained so much insight and wisdom. So I just want to make it super super clear for people, if they're like, "Ooh, I want to get closer to Karen in her in her circle, in her world." How do they connect with you? How do you work with people?
So I think the best thing is for people to either or both get on my mailing list. I don't know, some people hate mailing lists, some people like mailing lists, but I happen to think when I send out my newsletter, I call it a newsletter, my love notes, whatever.
Mhm.
I get such constant affirmation that what I'm sending to people is just incredibly helpful. So that's number one. And number two would be to buy a book that I wrote called Difficult Mothers, Adult Daughters, A Guide for Separation, Liberation, and Inspiration. That's like the taster.
That's where I started. When I first met you, I was like, I gotta read. I gotta find out what she has to say. I want to know. And that was the first book I bought. So yes, I second that wholeheartedly.
And then I would say that being on my mailing list, right? Like the book came out several years ago, so it's like, and I've learned a lot since then. So like, right, what I send out in my love notes is all the latest, all the greatest. I tell stories. I provide the practical stuff, boundaries, all of that.
Love it. And if you're doing a workshop or something, then you're sharing that in your newsletters. Yes. Okay. So if something's coming up that like people could be like, oh yeah, I want to do that with Karen.
And I do one-on-one work. I do have I call it the mother load.
Love that.
And it's about a 4-month thing. Like if, hey, look, my mom's getting old and I don't know how I'm going to navigate this, right? Like that kind of stuff, right? Or I need to have better boundaries so that I don't end up being estranged. I don't want to be estranged. How do I, that kind of stuff.
I needed you in my 20s. I would have plopped down all the money because even though it wasn't the end of my, like I was so shut down from everything. I was really barely functioning. it was just surviving.
Me too, in my 20s.
Yes. And I'm like, I do say to myself sometimes, like, where was Karen? When, obviously wasn't ready yet I wasn't ready, but I do say that to myself. It's like, oh, I could have cut probably a decade off of some of this like crazy meandering I did. But again, it's all good. It's all part of the divine plan. I don't believe it's like we're messing it up. But I do every once in a while, I'm like, okay, don't do that to me in the future. I say that to my guides. It's like, give it to me as soon as if I am ready and able, bring it. I want it. Don't make me wait 20 years. Oh, Karen, this has been so beautiful, delightful, deliciously insightful, all the things. Thank you so much. I will put all of your contact information in the show notes so people can easily connect and find you, the newsletter and everything else. And thank you so much for just being here and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you. And the animals are just coming back to say goodbye.
Love it. Love it.
Thank you so much. Stacey.
Oh, take care. Thank you. That's it for now, loves. Thank you for tuning in to this episode. Get all the juicy details and links we've mentioned in the show notes. If learning more about how you can use your own enchantment to live a oh hell yes life, come get your own coaching session with me by going to staceyandon.com and signing up for my homepage. And as always, come chat with me about this topic and all things enchantment in my Facebook group, Everyday Enchantment. See you on the flip side.